to another episode of the Crazy Stupid Marketing Show, the show where we talk about all the crazy stupid stuff people do in marketing and how with good marketing fundamentals, we cannot do that. And you know what I just noticed? This is like week 2 in a row where I've actually had a guest that's in the video with like the expert pictures, because I keep thinking like, oh man, I need to update this video because there's so many more experts now and there's only 8 pictures on there. But last week we had Eric and this week we have Ben, and their pictures are both in the video. Fun facts for those of you who are only listening on audio.
Well, I'm honored. I'm honored to have made the opening video. So,
I mean, someone's got to be on the opening video. And also, I feel like at this point, what are we on? We're on episode like 32 or something. And I'm like, I don't know how many pictures can you fit on this slide without it looking just crazy. And the whole point about the show is to not be crazy. So,
well, what we can do is we can flash people out in like half-second intervals, just get the ADHD people going absolutely crazy with it all. Yeah. Oh my God, overload.
We don't need to give anyone a seizure with the intro for the show. So anyway, I just thought that was fun fact for everyone who is joining us today. And if you are joining us today, we are super happy to have you joining us today for this conversation about communication leadership. And oh man. Okay, so I wrote in the post related to this show that I think we all get that marketing is about communication. Mm-hmm. But I feel like we don't really get into it that much. And we do, I mean, depending on the type of marketing that you might be out there doing in the world, there's a lot of broadcasting that happens, right? We take a one-way message, we send it out to a whole bunch of people. But there's more to communication than just broadcast. Cool. And we're going to talk about it today.
Cool. Because, I mean, I sit there and say, okay, marketing is part of communication. Advertising is part of communication. Trade show development is part of communication. PR is part of communication. Social media content is a part of communication. It's how you communicate across mediums and across your brand with stakeholders, clients, and internal people. That's what communication is. It's not one particular medium. It's how all of these things seamlessly come together to be able to enable people to listen to you, understand you, and value you.
So important, Ben. Now, we already hopped into the conversation, but for our friends who are joining us today who don't know who you are, would you like to give a little intro to who you are and why communication is so important to you?
Absolutely. I've been in the communications game for 30 years or nearly 30 years. I've always been there, sitting there going, okay, how do we get people to understand our value to them? How do we get people to understand that what we do solves a problem that they have a need to have fixed, and they actually have the money to fix it and the will to fix it? And I've always been in that thing, and I've done everything from working with grocery store chains to casinos to construction, manufacturing, healthcare, government. And it's always about how do we enable people to not only have a story, but tell the story in compelling ways. And over the last decade, what I've done is I've worked internally with companies, because a lot of companies communicate pretty effectively outside the organization. People, are pretty good at telling their story about who we are to the general public, but they're horrible at telling their own story inside their own organization. So, that's really where my focus is, and that's where my real love is.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's interesting to me because even in your intro about communication and what communication is, you talked about stakeholders, you talked about clients, you talked about internal resources. There's actually a lot of stakeholders. And I think when we look at marketing, which is a very big generalization for all of us, we think about prospects, right? We think about people who don't know us yet. And so maybe we're not thinking about clients. Maybe we're not thinking about our internal team. Maybe we're not talking about vendors, investors, and all of these other types of things. And really, at the end of the day, communication bundles them, or has the opportunity anyway to bundle them all into your story together.
Exactly. Because, I mean, people don't think about storytelling to prospects.
Mm.
They don't talk about storytelling to, government, so you can become an advocate for your industry, or to trade associations, or to the general public, who may never buy what you do, but they could influence the people that do want to buy your products. So it's a matter of taking a look at your organization and say, who do we need to influence? Who do we need to have under the umbrella? Who do we need as part of our tribe? And how do we tell stories in ways that resonate with them and get them to not only listen, understand, and value who we are?
Mhm. Okay, so before we get too far into this, I want to remind everyone who might be watching live that this is not just a conversation for Tracy and Ben, but it is also a conversation for everyone. So if you are joining us today and you have a question, or you have learnings, perspectives, insights that you would like to share, please pop them over into the chat. We would love to include them as part of the conversation. It makes it more robust, not less robust. It's not a distraction for us. It makes it better. So please contribute your thoughts, even if you think they're like so basic. No, that's never true. Right?
The only dumb question is the question not asked.
Yes, there's always someone else who has the same question as you. So please ask your questions. Okay, so before we get, I have all the directions I want to already go with this, but perfect. I also always think it is responsible to start off with a definition of communication. So if we're going to create a definition for sake of our conversation today, Ben, of conversation, where should we begin?
So communication to me is the all-encompassing medium of being able to tell the story of your brand. It overarches marketing. It overarches advertising, public relations, content marketing. All the different disciplines fall underneath it. They're all subsets of communication, because communication is how we enable people to understand what we think, what we believe, and be able to make it resonate in such a way that they internalize, can recall, and retell it. And so I look at this as being beyond marketing to a particular piece, trying to get people to spend money with us. I get it beyond brand, where we're trying to get people to understand who we are, what we do, and why we do it. It's the combination of all these factors that create effective communication, and it happens both inside the organization and outside the organization simultaneously.
Okay, let's talk about how many parties need to participate in it to be considered communication. Because as I mentioned in the intro, marketing tends to do a lot of broadcasts, especially from a quote unquote brand awareness perspective. So is there a requirement for it to be bi-directional in order for it to be considered communication, or no?
To me, it is. Good communication requires a minimum of two people, because not only are you saying things, but you're also listening. And it's that two-way communication. It's not only being able to let other people know what you're thinking and what you want and what you need and what you desire and what you're afraid of and what your aspirations are, but it's also being able to listen to the hopes, wants, fears, needs, and desires of the people that you're trying to communicate with. It's being able to create that understanding, if not synthesis, at least an understanding of the opposite point of view, or a different point of view. Right. Now, this can be one-to-one, it can be one-to-many, it can be, different groups involved in conversation and communication, but it starts with one-on-one.
Okay, so what happens then when we don't have two parties? And I'm looking at it from this perspective of like, let's say we've got a young marketing coordinator sitting in a job and they're responsible for posting on social media.
Yes.
So they post on social media. That's check the box. I posted the thing. But unless there is a very minimally a possibility for a feedback loop there, what are we hindering in terms of our communication?
Well, the challenge of using any medium as a ability to create a soliloquy is that you're basically talking into a void. You have no idea who you're talking to, why you're talking to them, what you want them to understand, and what you want them to do next. And unless we build those feedback loops, unless we are more interested in the comments than we are in the likes, we're not doing our job as marketers or communicators in general.
Right.
You know, the value is in what comes back. It's not in what is being said. The value is in what comes back, even if it's contrary to what your opinion is. Because if you get contrary opinions, you can sit there and say, okay, why are these opinions coming back different from what my viewpoint is? Am I right? Am I wrong? What is the thought process of the people that are saying these things? And how do we augment our communication so it resonates with these people?
Now, like, I love this concept about the value is in what comes back, because I often rant about market research and how people do it just to do it, and they just don't care about the data that comes back. And if that's you folks, please stop it. Stop doing it.
That's right. I got lots of bits and bytes, but I've never really looked at it.
Yeah, we don't need more data. We need meaningful data. So if the value, I think this is even a great perspective though, from a like posting on social media perspective, because I think a lot of times in doing that activity, people think that the value is in posting the thing, right? I posted X amount of content, I got X amount of likes, blah, blah, blah. But I think any of us who have ever had any kind of meaningful conversation on social media, which I like to think we're having right now, is that there was something that came back. Someone felt something about a story that you shared, or somebody shared a similar experience. I get this with my about section all the time on LinkedIn, because I shared this story about how I felt like I never fit in anywhere, and therefore I am really good at like doing a whole bunch of different things because I did that. I had a lot of practice. And the number of people who read that is surprising to me, because
which is awesome to begin with.
Who reads about sections? But they're like, I resonate with this so much. I didn't feel like I had a place to fit in. And when you create the opportunities for that, like the value for that isn't that I wrote it in my about section. The value of it is in that someone else resonated with it and shared it with me. Yes. Because otherwise I don't know that someone resonated with it. And it might be good. It might be out in the world providing insights and those things, which is nice. But that communication component doesn't happen until it comes back and I understand that what I put out there resonated with somebody. So I think it's just an interesting call out specifically for social media activities is, are we even trying, or are we terrified of getting feedback? Do we not want comments? Right? That's a conversation for a different day.
That's a different conversation. Yeah.
But like, are we creating the space? Are we creating the intention for people to have conversations and welcome that value that's coming back? There's so much power in those types of things.
Well, let me chew on this for a little bit, because it's two things you said that are really interesting. One, it's the conversation starts when somebody responds.
Right.
The real conversation begins when you initiate the response. So it's that third conversation. It's, hey, I put this information out there. Hey, listen, Tracy, that was amazing. I really enjoyed I thought this was great. And then the conversation begins when Tracy all of a sudden sits there and goes, hey, thanks for getting in touch with me. So what did you really like about this? And that's when you can share ideas. It's amazing how many people get a comment back in there though and go thanks, or just put a thumbs up. And what you're basically doing is you're killing the conversation.
Right.
And
Ugh,
the
not
more
something I'm all about.
no, and the thing is, it comes down to, do we actually care about our audience? Do we actually care about the people we communicate with and we want to communicate with?
Well, we care about their money then.
Well, and that's the trick, is do we care about people's money, or do we care about humans as human beings?
Mhm.
And I think as marketers, as leaders, as people that are part of an organization, we need to sit there and say, when we're communicating with human beings for a very specific purpose. What is that purpose that we're communicating them with? What do we really want? And we need to be honest with ourselves. Some people, you're right, are just in it for the money. Some people are just sitting there going, hey, click funnels, thank you very much. We're just in it for the money, and you're going to blast this information as much as we want. It's all about us. It's all about you serving our needs, you spending money with us, you making our company, more profitable, whatever. And that's what they're all about. And then there's organizations that become the significant organizations in the world today that actually care about their audience. They're actually trying to solve a problem. They're actually curious about the people who use their product. They want the feedback. They want the responses. They want to know the good, the bad, and the ugly, because they want to improve. And the question is, who are you as an organization? And you could be somewhere in between, but you need to figure that out before you start communicating with the world, to be able to be open, honest, and upfront about what do you really want, and what do you really want other people to believe about you.
Yeah. I keep thinking of, and I don't know if it's our friend Paul that's just echoing in my ears like he always does, but I'm hearing so much we in this, right? Like, this is a team, and it's not just about me mining your wallet for dollars. It's about being a team. And if I'm going to be a team with somebody, one, my goal is not to just be on a team for 20 minutes, right? Like, we're going to be on, if we're going to win a championship, anyway, we're not just going to be on a team for 20 minutes, right? We're going to figure out how to participate together. And so this idea of the team, I like the concept of a we story. Paul, our friend, calls it an us story. It's just too American for me with the US, so we're Canadians. We
are not amused, yes.
But this is about us going and doing something. It's not about you buying my stuff, which is a transaction. It's about us going together to do something. So when I think about that, then there is much more of a story there, and it feels like a communication program.
And we also need to realize that communication is not the purview of one person or one small team. It's the purview and the obligation of everybody within the organization.
It's not just marketing.
It's not just marketing. Marketing people, sit down. We'll have a 10-step about this. It's okay. You know what? Communication, being able to communicate both within the organization and also outside the organization, it's about enabling people from a variety of different parts of the organization to have conversations with real human beings outside the organization within their own sphere of influence. Finance people are going to talk about the brand in a finance point of view. Customer experience people are going to talk about it, customer service point of view. Ops people are going to talk about it in an ops point of view. But you know what? It's all talking about the same needs, wants, desires, and goals, because there are people whose job it is within the organization to communicate that story effectively within the organization, so people know where you've been, where you are, what you do, why you do it, who you do it for, and where you're going.
I mean, okay, let's talk about this, because we're sitting here talking about this. I'm like, I mean, all of this makes sense. It doesn't feel confusing or anything like that. What stops organizations from actually having a productive communication program?
I think, and it's a conversation I had earlier today. People are terrified of being fired.
This is true.
People are absolutely terrified of being fired. People are terrified of looking stupid. People are terrified of being the odd person out. And they're terrified of actually sitting there going, well, wait a second here. Can we talk about this?
Hmm.
Because they're afraid of the ramifications. And that's a culture thing
Hmm.
within companies. And that comes from the top leadership down. If there is a culture within the organization of you don't raise your voice, you don't lift your head, you don't speak truth to power, or whatever you want to say it is, you're going to have an organization where people are feeding you mushrooms. And as a leadership team, you may think you know what's going on, but people are only going to tell you what's within the echo chamber.
Hmm.
And that's extremely dangerous as an organization, because you're never going to get the feedback from what's really happening on the floor. You're never going to have the real feedback of what clients are saying. You're never going to have the real feedback of what vendors are saying, because people are afraid to transfer that information uphill because they're worried about what's going to flow downhill afterwards.
Mm.
And as long as you, as leadership, foster that type of culture, that's what you're going to get as an organization. And ultimately, you're going to become a commodity. You're going to be low price, low value. You're going to be easily forgotten and easily replaced.
Which is not what I'm all about. That sounds
No.
terrible. So, does this have to be a top-down thing then, Ben, from your perspective? Like,
Absolutely not.
no, can
Culture,
influence from the middle.
cultures need to be built where there is the effective empowerment of individuals to be able to have discussions that could be conflictual conversations. There needs to be healthy conflict within organizations. People need to be able to raise their hands, and they need to be able to raise their hands with their boss and their boss's boss, and maybe even their boss's boss.
Mhm.
To be able to sit there and say, hey, wait a second, what if, or what about? And hang on, I'm seeing this out in the field. This is conflicting with what we're seeing in the marketing. This is conflicting what I'm seeing within our brand. This is conflicting what I'm saying with the decisions that's being made, and it doesn't make sense. And I think it's taking us down the wrong path. It doesn't mean that everybody's opinion is going to be taken equally. It doesn't mean that everybody's opinion is going to be recognized. It should be. But a good leadership is at least willing to sit there and listen to it and sit there and go, oh, okay, now let me look for myself. And then they're going to make a decision based on a matrix of ideas of things that you may not even understand at your level. But you should be able to at least be able to have those conversations, to sit there and say, has anybody thought about this? Has anybody thought about, having, here's a perfect example. This is going back to marketing, and this is going back to Dove. Dove did a phenomenal job over the years of women empowerment within their commercials. They do a phenomenal job of women empowerment and looking at beauty from a wide variety of levels. But what they did in one commercial is where they were taking off sweaters and a different woman was appearing, and the way they edited it caused nothing but grief and headache, because what they did is a black woman took off her sweater and became a white woman. And a certain segment of the population got so upset about this because it basically said that, in their minds and in their viewpoint, that white was better than black. Then therefore it just killed an entire campaign. If you had somebody who watched the final edit and sit there and says, you know what, here's something you may want to think about, and had raised their hand, maybe that could have been re-edited in such a way that it would have created it. Because if you talk to any of the women that were part of this, none of those women felt that they were less than or marginalized or whatever. It was the way that it was edited just created a situation where it created havoc on social media and created a PR nightmare. And organizations need to have different views and different people willing to step up and raise their hand to be able to sit there and say, hey, wait a second, what if or what about?
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think I see like two challenges here, because
Yes.
one is the corporate culture, right? Whether
Yes.
or not you can do that. The second thing is whether or not people have the individual confidence to be able to do that, because depending on your upbringing, depending on what historic corporate trauma you might have started in an organization where that's totally like you can't, right? Like, or it's totally common for people to throw each other under the bus because I'm not responsible, that person's responsible. You go into another organization and you think that's the way things are done, right? Because that's what you know. And so even if you have a leader who does want to invite those types of things, there's a limitation from a personal perspective on being able to provide them. So these are not issues that can go away in like 5 minutes. These are complex human issues. But the point about this from a communication perspective is that we get to open up the door to something new through that conversation. So maybe we aren't proud of the way our culture of blame right now. And maybe there's a new CEO who comes in and is like, okay, we're done with this, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Except the problem is there's a lot of people in this organization who are pretty used to it. So now we need to create something new. And we create that opportunity through communication.
Well, and that's what a lot of what I do is to sit there and say, how do we do cultural mission, vision, value change within organizations? And you're right. It's not a short term process. It takes time. It takes retraining. It takes ongoing, open and honest conversations. It takes continuous ongoing and open conversations. Sometimes it takes retraining of middle management and lower management and senior management for that, of how to have those conversations and how to listen to people with their, as you can say, their previous trauma, and be able to sit there and say, look, we're not doing that anymore. But the problem is, if we say we're not doing that anymore, and then all of a sudden it happens again and nobody does anything and nobody fixes it right away, that's how it's continuing to be done. It's not what you say, it's what's actually being done in the organization. People will take a look at what's reality within the organization. How is senior leadership actually acting? How is middle management actually acting? And that's what they're going to believe, not platitudes, not comments, not diatribes or new mission statements. None of that means anything if there is an action that is attached to it.
Right. Okay. I want to go down that path, but I also want to go through this comment that has come through. So,
perfect.
LinkedIn user, we're not sure who you are. If you want to share a name, that would be great. In B2B tech, a culture of safety and transparency rarely exists, especially in sales and marketing. Fear kills trust and fosters ass covering, which is pretty much exactly what we were talking about. But Ben, I wanted to ask, do you see this specifically happening in specific industries like B2B tech in this example? Or is there something else that you see is common amongst the people who have challenges in this kind of ass covering arena?
Okay, I'm going to make a big, broad, bold statement that is going to have all sorts of exceptions and all sorts of, caveats, but we're going to say this word it is. Tech leaders are techies. They're not most of the time. And most of the time, social graces tend to be lacking because they're far more comfortable within their technical environment than they are leading a people. Small companies become medium companies, become large companies because people are driven and people have ideas and they drive ideas. And the problem is no one teaches you how to become a senior level executive.
True.
Most people don't go and get the coaches and the training and the things that they need to become senior level executives. You become that way because you were a doer. You wanted to stop being a doer, so you offloaded stuff, you give it to somebody else, and therefore you keep going and keep going, and you keep offloading stuff, and the team builds.
Mm.
But there isn't always the structure in place to build the human factors into the business, to build the culture and all that. It says it's driven, it's purpose, it's 90-day sprints, it's it's the startup mentality, it's everything that goes with it. It's the VC, survive or die mentality, and there's a lot of things that go along with it, and the culture of collaboration. There's collaborative ideation, but there may not be ideation of, it might be my way or the highway. And it really depends on who the leader is within these organizations and how much they believe that my job is to be the overall visionary and to hire people that are great at what they do and let them do it, or people that sit there and go, I was a programmer, you're just stupid. And hire, fire, and it's somebody else in there to fill a role. So, I'm painting with huge brushstrokes, huge generalities, and this is not just tech.
Right.
This is organizations as they grow up. A lot of them don't take the time to have an effective chief people leader or chief communications officer, or somebody that can sit there and do the strategy of being able to get the human factors that make businesses grow effectively and build the communication structures that allow for that facilitation. Those are the challenges.
Yeah. And I think that this is, it kind of comes back to a know your own strengths.
Yes.
Right.
And know your own weaknesses.
Well, and this is the point, is that in the example that you gave, there's a very skilled developer who wants to move into a senior level role and starts giving the development activities away to other people. That person's actually quite skilled at those roles, right? And something that I've seen happen quite often too is that people end up in even a CEO role, and they're like, I just want to do the tech, right? Like, I would rather just be like a chief product officer or something like that, and be responsible for the product, because that's my joy, that's my love, that's my happy place. That is where I can contribute the most. And I think leadership is still falls into this arena where most often you're getting promoted because you were good at a thing, and what you were good at wasn't necessarily leading people.
Yeah. I mean, for people who don't understand what the Peter principle is, because that's exactly what you're saying, is you're promoted to your highest level of incompetency. Because as we get promoted, we're not given the skill sets to make us effective and make us valuable at the next level. It's figure it out or die. And, it takes a completely different skill to be a tactician than it is to empower and to lead tacticians. Because if you're a tactician and you become a leader by default because you were the best tactician, you tend to micromanage. Because you're sitting there going, well, I can do that better. Well, the difference is they're going to do it different.
Right.
And it's a matter of understanding that you're not in that role anymore. Your job is not to sit there and be a code advocate, but your thing is to be an advocate of the people that code.
Right. Yeah, this is like, let's talk about this specifically from a marketing perspective for a minute, because I think that often in people's early marketing careers, they are a tactician, and people are responsible for social media. They're responsible for email. They're responsible for design, or they're responsible for video, and everything in marketing is very, and getting even more so segmented, right? I'm going to get an expert in TikTok to come in and do TikTok instead of like a social media manager. And so how do we go from like that level of expertise as a tech? Actually, let's start here. How do we identify whether or not leadership is right for us? Because I think people still think that like moving up by like, in order for me to progress in my career, I have to move from being a tactician or a specialist into leadership.
Yeah.
I do not believe that that's the right trajectory for all people. So how might we identify if that is actually a good match for us or not?
I think that's an excellent question. I mean, I can give you an example without names or company of somebody that ended up having a 3-month stress leave because she became the director of marketing.
Mm.
And
Not uncommon. I have seen
you know,
that in my experience as well.
because they just couldn't handle the stress and the responsibilities of people at that level. They've since moved into a completely different non-marketing part of the company, and they are much happier and they're far more productive, and they're far more valuable. But the first question we need to ask is, do these people want to be promoted?
Right.
What are your not what are my aspirations for you? What are your aspirations for yourself? And people said, they say, well, people don't know what they want. Yeah, a lot of people do. A lot of people sit there and say, you know what? I want to be a great number 2, or I want to be a great number 3. I want to be the power behind the power. I want to be the person that the person who's in charge relies upon, is given the authority, given the responsibility, and my job is to make projects work.
Mhm.
I love that. That's my superpower. That's where I want to be. Or I love coding. You know what? You got to give me a new project every 6 months, or else I'm going to go nuts, because I don't want to be stuck on the same project thing. But I don't want to lead people.
Mhm.
The person who's good at leading people. Here's a hint: are the people that are leading people as they're being tacticians. They're
Mhm.
not your superstars in any particular field. What they're good at is building teams. What they're good at is communication. What they're really good at is bringing the best out of the team, and they think about we before me.
Mhm.
Those are the people, hint, that really need to be promoted, because they're the ones that are going to be able to sit there and say, look, my job is to make this team better.
Mhm.
It's not about how much sunshine can fall on me, it's how much sunshine can fall on us.
Right.
And I think we as leaders need to sit there and have great conversations with people about, where do you want to be? What does good look like to you, and what does great look like to you? In 15, 20 years, looking back, what would have been a phenomenal career? And what are the things you want to learn? What are the things you want to do? What are the things you aspire to be? And for some people, it may have nothing to do with work.
Mhm.
Great may have nothing to do with work. They said, you know what? I'm happy making my $110,000 a year. I've got a small team. I really like my team. We work well together. I love the fact that we're symbiotic. We do great things together. That I know everybody. I'm able to have conversations. I feel like I win at the end of every day.
Mhm.
That could be a good career for somebody for 20 years. It may not be a good career for you,
Right.
but it could be a good career for them. And I think we need to stop looking at people as chess pieces and start sitting there going, where do you as a person feel that you want to be in 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years? And a great leader is having those conversations not once, but how, if asking people, have things changed?
Right. I would I mean, this is really is in alignment with my story, right? Because I was lucky to have a very good manager who saw in me that I was kind of by default leading the team, and then gave me a like risk-free opportunity to be the team lead and try it. And if you like it, cool, we can keep going in that direction. But if you don't like it, that's fine. You can go back to your area of expertise. And I happen to love it, and it's like one of the things that continues to drive me to like see people succeed.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not. I've also had employees who wanted to be on the management track, and it just was a terrible fit for them. I know I have a really good friend actually who always says, like, works in middle management, always says, like, I don't even want to be in senior level leadership, because this is what senior level leadership looks like at this company. And
Mm-hmm.
I don't want that for my
Mm-hmm.
life. And it's so interesting when you have these more like social conversations with people and you see those sides, instead of assuming that everybody wants to to be a leader, but also then being able to reframe. Like, it was important for me to be able to reframe, like, what does it look like for you to continue to progress in this area of your expertise? Because people want to grow and evolve and make more money and all of those things, add more value. And my rule is always, if you're adding more value, then I'll pay you more money. If you're bringing in more money, I'll have more money to pay you. So everybody wins.
And I think it's also important, and you said it says that there are people out there that do want that leadership. And you know what? No offense, they're not ready for it yet. And a good leader sits there and says, listen, you know what? I hear you. I understand you. Here's where we are today. Here's where you want to go. Here's the delta. I need you to work on this, 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 and this. And when you've proven this, then you can move forward. And I will be more than happy to move
see if you like that.
And you know, and let's test it along the way and give this person like I said, you give the person responsibility along the way. You build them into that role, and you let them build the muscles over time. Because unfortunately, you're going to have some people who are going to sit there, but I deserve to be the director of marketing now. Well, guess what? Maybe you do, maybe you don't. More than likely, when you're 20 years old, you don't. I'm going to be real blunt about it. You know, you don't have the tapestry at 20 years old to be a great director of marketing. You probably don't have the tapestry to be a good director of marketing, because it's more about being that person that is not thinking about themselves. It's thinking about others and thinking about the company as a whole and objectives. You know, CMOs get fired because CMOs do not understand the business. If you're a CMO and don't have great business acumen, you're never going to survive. Being the CMO is the shortest tenure of any major organization by the factor of maybe 2. And because most CMOs are so worried about brand and message and marketing and this and that, the other thing, that they forget about the business objectives. And the business objectives is, how do we make money?
We have to make money. Otherwise, people cannot get paid.
Exactly. There's another question that came in.
Yes. Yeah, well, it's more of a statement.
Okay.
And it's Akeem. Akeem is
hey, Akeem, how are you, buddy?
Is joining us as LinkedIn user. Part of the CMO stress comes from CEOs making overinflated promises to investors or the board and having to make good on them. And the expectations of immediate results from the CXO, whichever high-level position, which makes no sense considering the time lag in marketing. And it's specifically in marketing, because we do have a time lag. We have a time. What I post today isn't necessary unless you're doing like Black Friday sales and people already know you are a well-established brand in the market and all of this. Then maybe Black Friday can drive a bunch of money. But like in general, let's talk about overinflated promises, because I do feel like this is tied into communication.
I think it comes down to being able to manage up and manage down. A good leader, I don't care which department they are, and I don't care where they are in the organization, because a CEO still has to manage up to a board.
Right.
You know, I don't care where you are in the organization. You have to be able to manage up and you have to manage down, and you have to be able to set expectations and accountability and say, fine, if you want this, if you as a CEO have made this promise, I totally, absolutely understand that. However, I need this, 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 and this to be able to make that happen. You know, what do you want to fall by the wayside to make that happen? You know, who do you need me to fire? You know, do you want to sit there and hold my hand and we'll walk down to so-and-so's office tomorrow and fire them if that's what needs to happen? Okay, Mr. CEO, you're not very comfortable with it. Well, what's our other opportunity? So it's a matter, I think that people need to come down, and I think it comes down to the fact that people are unwilling to put themselves in a position to be fired. Right. But I think we as leaders, and I don't care if it's a first-time leader or it's a CEO, we need to be able to manage up and we need to be able to manage down, and we need to be able to sit there and say, look, okay, I understand this. I understand these are the realities. I understand this is the priority. That's fine. We can't have 7 different competing priorities. Which priority has to come off the table in order to be able to make this happen? You've made this situation. You've decided that this is where we're going. I fully understand that. What needs to fall by the wayside in order for this to become the new priority?
And I think, I mean, even in that, right? I feel like there's so much power in those type of conversations because
Mhm.
it allows that level of transparency that maybe the CEO doesn't have, right? The CEO has lots of areas and they might not have the details about what you know impacting their ability to make that decision. But I think at the same time, it's really interesting because I do feel like a lot of ego can come up in those types of conversations
Huge.
and not and but to go back to what we were talking about where the response is the value, right?
Mhm.
What I was just given as a gift was that someone told me that there's all this other stuff, right? And okay, maybe I saw that, maybe I didn't see that, but now it gives me an opportunity to actually prioritize those things. And a lot of times in marketing, there's so many little tasks that people do that add up, add up, add up, add up. And like I say this quite often, like when I was a vice president of marketing, I worked at least 12-hour days. Part
Yes.
of it was the expectation of the organization as a senior leader that you were going to work longer hours than everybody else. Part of it was that I didn't have any other life at that point, and part of it was that I was just doing things because I was supposed to do things. I was supposed to complete lots of things in a
Yeah.
day, so I did lots of things, and even like I'm one of the most effective people I know from a working hour
Mhm.
perspective. Like I can get a lot of stuff done in an hour. um, but so much of it was stuff that didn't need to be done, that wasn't
Or didn't need
contributing.
to be done by you.
Well, honestly, a lot of it was stuff that didn't even need to be done. So,
Right.
like, one, you should not have a senior level marketing resource doing that. I actually told my boss at one point, we had this, like, all this data coming back from a trade show. Salespeople collected all the cards and stuff. They want to put it in the CRM. The CEO wanted me to do that. And I was like, that is a terrible plan. Why don't we hire your son who is 15 and pay him $10 an hour or whatever that was the hourly rate at the time to do that, right? He makes a little bit of money. This does not take skill or knowledge, right?
Right.
Like this is just data entry. This is a terrible way for me to use my time. And like I always remember the time where I got asked to like change the colors on a logo. And for those of you who know me, like I'm not a graphic designer. I've never pretended to be a graphic designer. Did I have access to Adobe Creative Suite? Yes, I did. But
Mhm.
like I didn't know how to use it. And I was the only person in the office. I really needed to do this. And I was like, one, why did we get into the scenario where we need this logo right now and we haven't thought about it up until this point? Okay, let's talk about that later. And two, I can try, but like now you're spending a senior level marketing resource dollars in a huge amount of, like it probably took me 3 hours to figure out how to do it instead of just one using the logo, which was pretty close to the right color. Right? Like fix it the next time. You're using it in a presentation. Who cares? Right?
Mhm.
It's not even like I'm printing anything, right? Just put it in the deck and go. It's fine. But like there are so many of those like little things that add up, and when we are brave enough, I'm going to use brave, right?
Yeah.
We have enough courage to show up and say like, hey, here's some things you might not see, and that's fair, right? You got a different job, different role, different insight, that's fine. Here's what you might not see, and I think with that information, we, back to the we part of this, can make a intelligent decision for the business about what is the right thing for us to spend our time on.
But you're also giving whoever you're talking to extra information that enables them to go back to the people that were pushing them and be able to push back. And it enables them to sit there and say, wait a second, this isn't on brand, it's not on message, it's not on it's not our values, it doesn't make sense with the business case that we've already doing. Why are we doing this? It says, I've talked to our marketing team about this. They're already working on this. Those meet our objectives. This doesn't currently meet our objectives. why are we doing this?
Right.
And it enables them to have the tools that they need to be able to go back and make sufficient arguments to the people that they need to be arguments to be able to make things better for everybody.
Right.
And I think that that's part of managing up and managing down is giving people the tools they need to be able to make sufficient arguments to be able to stay on brand, message, and value.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Okay, I just looked at the clock and we're like already
Oh my,
5 minutes over.
how did we get here?
I don't know. We have all of the things to say. But there's two other things I wanted to touch on
Okay.
that we like hinted to but didn't really talk about. So this concept of actions, and I think we've all heard the phrase actions speak louder than words. So from a communications perspective, how important are the actions versus or in conjunction with the words?
Do what I say, not what I do. How many times have we heard that?
I was trying to like count in my head, but I don't even know. A
Yeah,
lot.
exactly. But that's the kiss of death within any organization. Do what I say, not what I do, is basically saying there's two sets of rules.
Right.
One for you as a leader and one for everybody else.
Right.
And that doesn't work. And if we're not, as organizations, consistent with our thoughts and our actions, people will judge us on our actions and not on our thoughts. Because in the end, our thoughts don't matter if they're not congruent with our actions.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I have a lot of friends who talk about like values in action, specifically Lindsay Harlekadatz, who I think we both know. And I think this is me making this is what I think, not what is necessarily real, but that when we're doing something because we want to do it,
yes,
we are much more likely to be in alignment between our actions and our thoughts and our words. Very commonly in business practice, we are doing things because other people think we should.
Yes.
And whether that's from a marketing perspective or a leadership perspective, or I mean, extrapolate it to any perspective. There's shoulds coming at us from all directions all the time. And when we're doing things because someone else said we should, there's a much higher likelihood that our thoughts and words don't match our actions, because I'm only doing what you told me to do, not what I actually believe.
But should can be dealt with if people understand the why. And far too few organizations explain the why. We're doing this because of this. This will enable us to do this, which enables us to do things that we can't currently do. And this is why that's important. And
so
that's
quick question on
communication.
That, Ben. Yes. I feel like I see a lot of things people do from a marketing perspective that they've been told they should do, and they don't have a good why. Yes. Their competitors do that, so we should do that. I read this in this book, so we should do that. And there's like, I heard it on the Crazy Stupid Marketing Show, and we should do that, right? Like, that's not the point of this show, by the way, folks. Please don't do that. Please test out your why against the things you hear on this show. But is it that we're that disconnected from our why?
We're disconnected from our why, and we're disconnected from our customer. More than anything, we're disconnected from our customer, because if we understood our customer, whether it's an internal customer, an external customer, whatever, we would understand why something is important to do it.
Right.
Because we're doing it for a specific reason, for a specific audience.
Right.
Like, I'm going to have a specific conversation with you that I may not have with Acom.
Right.
Different scenarios, different situations, different needs. But the thing is, I'm going to do something for you because I understand why it's important to do it and what it's going to enable us to do together. The same thing with Acom.
Right.
But the situation may be completely different.
Right. Yeah. True. Okay. I also want to touch on the concept of listening as part of
what did you say?
Because I remember having this conversation once with my husband, more from like a political perspective, but like,
Mhm.
if we're going to have freedom of speech, shouldn't that require you to listen though as well? Like, if you're going to get freedom of speech, you have to earn it by listening. That seems like something that would be fair.
It seems that would be logical, but it is far from the truth.
Ooh, so far
Yes.
from the truth, especially from a political landscape. But how, I feel like this whole basic question is like, how important is listening? But we all know that listening is important. So more so, what stops us from listening if we're really invested in communication?
Okay, let's take it from a situation where you're having a conversation and in your mind, while Tracy's talking, Ben is going, and what about this? And what about this? And I'm not saying any, and these things are going on through my head. And I'm already formulating my answers. I'm already formulating my rebuttal. I'm already formulating, how I'm going to rebut your thought process before I've said a word.
Right.
And then I get into the yeah, but as I'm trying to break in. When I've done all that, I'm not listening.
Mm.
I've taken one minute point that you probably said 5 minutes ago.
Right.
And I've focused and concentrated on that, and I've totally negated the rest of the conversation, because in my mind, you've said something that I totally and absolutely disagree with, and therefore I need to be able to prove that I'm right and you're wrong.
Mhm.
And that's the mental thought that's going through people's minds, whether they're conscious of it or they're not conscious of it. We listen to respond instead of listen to understand.
Mhm.
And we as people, and podcasting has been a blessing for me, because podcasting enables me to shut my yap, listen to the entire thought of what people are saying, digest what they're saying, then formulate my answer, then I respond. And it allows for far more cohesive conversations, because I'm actually taking your entire context of what you're saying before I'm formulating what my thought process is in rebuttal or in agreement.
Mhm.
And I think that too few of us, and I'm guilty of it as well. You get in the middle of a heated conversation and you're all about you're wrong, I'm right. And we need to move beyond that as human beings and sit there and say, wait a second, what are they actually saying? Why are they actually saying it? What's the motivation and the fears and the wants and the needs behind that statement? Okay, let's delve into that before I have to sit there and prove that you're wrong and I'm right.
Right.
And that's difficult to do. It's extremely difficult to do. It takes
Like
a go
listening
ahead.
without judgment, right?
Listening
I
without
think is the
judgment.
thing. And it's interesting because people who watch this show, you might notice that every once in a while I write down notes. I write down notes of things that I hear people say. And the reason I do that is because I don't want my brain to get stuck on that note and just keep me in that part. I want to be able to continue on listening to the conversation. But there was something about that stood out for me. And so I want to record that. And that's not the right way to do that. And I mean, I've done some work on deep listening and things like that. And we all have, this is the fun thing about it too, might be very good at it. I'm probably particularly good at it on this show, but as soon as my mom is talking to me, like it's like I lose all my skills. So it's also interesting to look at if communication is really like a holistic package of skills, right? How
Mm-hmm.
we might have that skill that we're very strong in a personal relationship, but we haven't been able to transition it into a professional or vice versa. And this is again where I love the concept of the show. The whole point of this is to like hear these things and then try them on. Oh, where have I been doing that? Where have I been doing that? Maybe I haven't. Maybe I'm awesome at listening all the time, but I don't know any human who's awesome at listening all the time. If you know them, I would love to know them.
Absolutely.
um, but like part of what makes us human is that we're not perfect at any of these arenas. But it really just comes down to, again, which I think I come back to every single episode, is our intention. Right? What are our intentions from a communication point of view? Are we interested in knowing our clients and our prospects, in helping our people and helping our teams internally? Are we interested in understanding what our vendors think about doing business with us? Like, how there's so many people that make a brand tick. And when the communication is flowing freely and is accepted between all of those nodes, then whew, folks, game changer.
It is. It's absolutely amazing. And you're right. But the challenge is there are certain people that push our buttons, whether it's somebody within your organization, whether it's a personal relationship, whether it's your kids, whether it's your spouse, whoever it is. There are certain people where this huge skill set that you've created and you've perfected goes out the window. And
and it's okay.
and we can't judge ourselves and beat ourselves up about it. We need to acknowledge it, and we need to get a little bit better. Mm-hmm. We're never going to be perfect with certain people. There's certain people that, you know what, there's just too much baggage, and there's too much history, and there's too much this. Our goal is to get better, not perfect.
Mm-hmm. No such thing as perfect, folks.
No.
And I just want to share this last quote that Akim shared. The word listen contains the same letters as the word silent.
Brilliant.
Brendel. And it's so, I do think too, in our like world of efficiency and effectiveness and moving fast and getting stuff done, that seemingly we are not taking a moment to just be quiet, to be in silence, to understand what is someone really saying, right? And we all know we didn't even get into levels of communication today, right? No. Like there's a whole deep treasure trove of things we could talk about on the communication front. But if we don't slow down, if we don't take a moment, we don't have the opportunity to build those skills, to build those connections, and to create these opportunities for team in communication. And I think one of the things that Ben and I would both champion is, let's try. Maybe let's do a little bit, see what happens.
And fail and learn. It's okay to fail and learn.
Yes, please fail and learn, because I don't know anybody who has just like win their way to success. That's not the way it happens. The Olympics are on right now, folks. You think any of those people have never lost a race?
Or fallen on their butts?
Man, I just watched the Canadian women's rugby sevens just like leave their hearts on the field to win a silver medal, which they were not like they earned that silver medal. But like they lost. They're going to be better next time. And that's part of the journey.
There you go. So
awesome.
I now don't have to watch that. So,
You know what I just learned though? I don't really watch rugby, but it's the Olympics, so I watch it. The games are like very short. Like a short game. But I mean, it's hardcore, right? There's a lot of sprinting. There's a lot of hitting. These people are not wearing pads.
No.
Like I would have a concussion in like 10 seconds if I was playing rugby, I'm sure. But like, man, that's some grit. And that's built by putting in the effort and putting in the time.
Yeah. Well, Tracy, thank you for having me on the show. I've really enjoyed this. This was a lot of fun.
You know what's funny? I think, Ben, you've only been on panels before.
Yes.
But the two of us can clearly fill the space.
Easily. We could do this again many times over.
Many times. Even on communication. There's so much more to talk about. Ben, for those people who are watching you today and might want to learn more about what fractional communications leadership is, or what you do, or even just continue the conversation from today, where's the best place for them to find you?
Yeah, the best place is yourbrandmarketing.com. It's really simple. If you go to yourbrandmarketing.com, everything's there. It pushes to my LinkedIn. It pushes to my YouTube. It pushes to my books, my ebooks, all the different thought leadership I did. Everything is sitting right there at yourbrandmarketing.com.
Yeah, and I am pretty sure you're a fan of chatting with people too, right? So people can
I
connect with you.
absolutely am. Book 30 minutes and let's have a conversation.
And it's never a bad way to spend your time. I
No,
think, what am I? I'm on your calendar at least every couple of months just to have a
absolutely.
conversation. There's more stuff to talk about because communication wins the day, folks.
It's true. It's very true.
See what I did there? All right, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. Akim, thank you so much for being the mysterious LinkedIn user in the comment section today. We both appreciate you. And to anyone else who is watching who is either watching the replay so we don't see you live in real time, or
Go
you
team
just
replay.
you weren't in the comments today. Maybe get into the comments next time because that is communication. Haha! Communication is everywhere. I could do this all day, but I'm not going to do this all day. I'm going to get back to my day and let you all get back to your day. Thank you so much for joining us, Ben. Thank you so much for all of your wonderful golden nuggets as usual. And until next time, everybody, permission to do you. Bye bye.